David woke up in the middle of the night, his chest tight and heavy. At first he thought he was dreaming. The pressure on him was strange, almost suffocating, as if a weight was pinning him down. His eyes snapped open in panic. The room was dim, the faint blue glow of the city lights slipping through the blinds. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, and then his heart almost stopped. There on top of him was his alien roommate. Lyra's golden eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, unblinking, locked on his face. Her forearms were braced against his shoulders and sides, claws curved but not cutting, holding him down as if she was afraid he might vanish. Her breathing was strange, quick, sharp, with a clicking noise deep in her throat that David had never heard before. For a moment he couldn't move. His mind ran through 100 thoughts at once. Was she attacking him? Was this some alien instinct he didn't know about? Or worse, had she finally decided that sharing a tiny apartment with a human wasn't worth it? His voice cracked when he finally found the strength to speak. "Lyra, what the hell are you doing?" The question came out sharper than he meant, but fear had gripped him too tight. His chest burned from the pressure, and the sight of her glowing eyes so close sent a cold shiver down his spine. Lyra didn't answer right away. She only stared at him, her frilled neck trembling slightly, her face unreadable in the shadows. Her body trembled as if she had been running, though David knew she hadn't moved from this spot in the last few seconds. "Lyra," David said again, louder this time, almost yelling. "You're scaring me." That seemed to break her out of whatever trance she was in. Her claws eased off his shoulders. Slowly, carefully she pulled back, though she was still kneeling over him, her strange, tall frame casting an alien silhouette against the light. "You? Safe," she whispered, her voice broken and uneven. Her English was good enough for most conversations, but right now it was fractured, as though her emotions were cutting through her words. "I had to check. You? Safe now." David's chest rose and fell in heavy breaths. He sat up halfway, rubbing at his sternum where her weight had pressed him down. His heart was still racing. He looked at her glowing eyes, at the way her hands shook even though she was trying to keep them still. "What are you talking about?" he asked, voice softer now but still confused and tense. "Safe from what? You nearly crushed me in my sleep." Lyra's head lowered at his tone, her frills trembling. For her kind, it was a sign of fear or maybe guilt. The clicking in her throat grew quieter, but it didn't stop. Her next words were almost a whisper. "Danger. Dream said you stopped breathing. I could not lose you." The room went silent after that. Only the faint hum of the old heater filled the gap. David stared at her, struggling to understand. Dream stop breathing? What was she even talking about? He wanted to argue, to shout, to demand why she would ever think pinning him down was the solution. But then he saw something that made him pause. Lyra's golden eyes, always so steady, always so unreadable, were wide with something he had never seen before. Fear. Genuine, trembling fear. And in that moment, his anger faded just enough for him to realize something important. She hadn't been trying to hurt him. She had been trying to save him from something she believed was real. David's confusion grew heavier with each passing second. He rubbed his face, sighing, his heartbeat finally slowing. He wanted to believe she was telling the truth. He wanted to believe she had some reason for this strange behavior. But the truth was, he had no idea what was happening. Yet one thing was certain. This night wasn't going to be simple. David sat upright on the bed, still rubbing his chest. His breathing was steady now, but the memory of Lyra's weight pressing down on him made him uneasy. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock and the soft hum of the heater. He wanted to speak, but his words stuck in his throat. Lyra crouched at the edge of the bed, her long arms folded close to her chest as if she were trying to make herself small. Her frilled neck trembled, glowing faintly with stress. Her eyes, those golden eyes that usually seemed so calm, were clouded with something he could only describe as fear. Finally, she whispered, her voice trembling. "I had to check. You stopped. I saw it. No air. No sound. Gone." David frowned, confusion twisting in his chest. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't stopping anything. I was just sleeping." "Normal sleep." Lyra shook her head quickly, almost violently. Her claws tapped against the wooden frame of the bed, a nervous tic she had when her emotions grew too strong. "Not normal. Not safe. I dreamed. I felt it. You left me in dream." Her English was broken, but her meaning was heavy. She had dreamed of him dying. She had dreamed of him stopping, his breath, his life. And for her it had felt real. David leaned back, dragging a hand over his tired face. It was just a dream, Lyra. People dream all kinds of things. Bad things, scary things, but they're not real. Her eyes snapped up to his, glowing brighter in the dim room. To you, maybe, she said, her tone sharper than usual. But not to Kieran. Dreams. They are warnings. Warnings we cannot ignore. David's chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from a strange sadness. He didn't fully understand her people or their culture. He had lived with Lyra for months, and while they had shared meals, laughter, and even awkward fights about household chores, there were still walls between them, things she had never explained, things he had never asked. And now, in the middle of the night, one of those hidden truths had spilled into the light. He studied her for a long moment. She was trembling, her voice soft and uncertain. "I could not lose you," she whispered again, this time more fragile, as if the words themselves could break her. Something about the way she said it pierced straight into David's chest. Lyra wasn't the type to show weakness. She was strong, sharp, and often brutally honest. She had defended him more times than he could count. From rude neighbors who mocked their unusual living arrangement to strangers who muttered insults about humans and aliens not mixing. She had stood tall through it all. But right now, she looked small, vulnerable. David swallowed hard. His instinct was to comfort her, but part of him was still shaking from the shock. The image of waking up pinned down, gasping for air, was burned into his mind. He wasn't sure how to process both fear and sympathy at once. "Lyra," he said slowly, choosing each word carefully. "I know you thought you were helping me, but you scared me. You can't just jump on me like that." Her frills dimmed, folding closer to her neck, a Kieran gesture of shame. She looked away, her claws curling tight against her palms. "I know, wrong way. But no choice. If I do nothing and you die, I fail, I break bond." "Bond?" David echoed softly. Lyra nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "Kieran make bonds with those we trust. Strong bonds. To ignore warning dreams is betrayal. To lose bonded one is worse than death." The words hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. David's mouth went dry. He wanted to argue that it was just a dream, that humans didn't believe in such things, that he was fine. But something in her voice made him stop. It wasn't just superstition to her. It was truth. Silence stretched between them, long and tense. David lay back slowly, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts racing. He could still feel her weight, her fear, her desperation. She wasn't lying. She truly believed she had saved his life, and that realization made his heart ache, because maybe this wasn't just about a dream. Maybe it was about something deeper, about the way Lyra saw him, the way she had chosen to protect him no matter what. He turned his head to look at her again. She was still there, sitting at the edge of the bed, her glowing eyes dim now but fixed on him, waiting for judgment. And for the first time, David didn't see just an alien roommate. He saw someone who was afraid of losing him, someone who cared. The unspoken fear between them filled the room, heavy but fragile. Neither of them had the right words. But maybe, just maybe, they didn't need them yet. David did not sleep again that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft sound of Lyra shifting restlessly at the edge of the room. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt again the heavy weight of her body pinning him down, her glowing eyes so close, her trembling voice whispering about danger. When morning light finally slipped through the blinds, David sat up slowly, his body aching from lack of rest. Lyra was still there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, as if she had kept watch over him the whole night. Her back was straight, her claws resting on her knees, but her frills were drooping with exhaustion. She looked as though she hadn't blinked once. David sighed and rubbed his eyes. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" Lyra tilted her head, her golden eyes dull in the daylight. "Sleep not important? Bond is." There it was again, that word, bond. He didn't fully understand what she meant by it, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that made her stay awake all night just to watch him breathe. He dragged himself to the kitchen, his movements slow, his mind heavy. The old apartment smelled faintly of coffee and metal, the mix of his morning habits and her strange Kieran tools that always cluttered the counter. He started the coffee machine, its hum filling the silence, and finally turned to face her. She had followed him quietly, her tall frame almost too large for the small kitchen space. Okay, Lyra, David said, leaning against the counter, his voice tired but firm. You need to explain this to me. Everything. What happened last night, why you did it, and what this bond thing even means. Because right now I'm confused, scared, and I can't live like that. Lyra stood still for a moment, her frills twitching as if she was trying to find the right words. Finally, she spoke slowly and carefully. Kirin people. We are born with instinct, deep sense. It is more than dream. It is warning. When danger comes to one we bond with, deep sense tells us. If we ignore, bad things happen always. David frowned, trying to follow. So you dreamed I stopped breathing and your deep sense told you it was real? She nodded. Yes, to us dream is not only dream. It is signal. A message from Bond. The coffee machine beeped, breaking the tension for a brief second. David poured himself a cup, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to process her words. He had always known Lyra's people were different. Different biology, different culture, different ways of seeing the universe. But this was something new. Something deeper, and the bond, he asked carefully. Lyra's eyes softened, glowing faintly in the morning light. Bond is life. When Kirin choose someone, they are part of us. Family protect her heart. We cannot leave them. We cannot lose them. If Dream says they are in danger, we act. Always. Her voice grew softer, almost a whisper. I chose you, David. You are my bond. The words hit him harder than he expected. He set down his cup slowly, staring at her. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't even known it was possible. But hearing it, seeing the raw truth in her glowing eyes, made something in his chest ache. He remembered the night they first became roommates, when everyone had warned him not to live with an alien. He remembered the laughter of co-workers, the suspicious stares of neighbors. And yet Lyra had been there, steady and loyal, no matter how hard it was. She had always treated him with respect, and now she was telling him she had bound her very life to his. David sank into the chair, running his hands through his hair. Lyra, do you even realize how crazy that sounds to a human? We don't do bonds like that. We don't have warning dreams. We just have nightmares. That's all. Lyra stepped closer, kneeling so that her glowing eyes met his tired ones. Maybe to humans it is crazy. But to me it is truth. If you die, bond breaks. If bond breaks, I break too. Her words sent a shiver down his spine. She wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't trying to scare him. She was simply telling him the reality of her people. David looked away, staring at the steam rising from his coffee. He felt overwhelmed by her loyalty, by her fear, by the idea that his life was tied to hers in a way he had never agreed to, but couldn't deny. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the heater and the distant noise of the city waking outside. Finally, David whispered, almost to himself, "What am I supposed to do with that?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out slowly, resting one clawed hand gently on his arm. Her touch was careful, almost fragile, but her voice was steady. Live, just live. I protect. That is enough. David closed his eyes, his heart torn between fear and something else, something that felt dangerously close to trust. The rest of the day passed slowly for David. Even though the morning conversation had given him some answers, his chest still carried a heavy knot of confusion. He couldn't stop replaying the moment in his head. Waking up in the middle of the night, her heavy body pressing him down, her glowing eyes full of fear. Lyra, on the other hand, moved around the apartment in silence. Normally, she filled the space with small noises, soft humming in her alien tongue, the clicking sound of her claws tapping furniture, or the strange rhythm she made when cooking. But today, she was quiet, careful, and distant. Every time David glanced at her, she was watching him as if making sure he was still breathing. David wanted to feel grateful, but instead he felt torn. A part of him wanted to push her away, to say, "This is too much." Another part, the stronger part, remembered all the times she had been there for him. He remembered when a group of men on the street had made fun of him for walking with an alien roommate. David had been ready to walk away, but Lyra had stepped forward, her tall frame towering over them, her frills flaring with warning. She didn't even speak, just stood her ground until the men grew nervous and left. He remembered nights when loneliness had crushed him. His family lived far away, and video calls never felt the same. He would sit quietly on the couch, eyes wet, trying to hide it. Lyra never asked questions, never forced him to talk. She would simply sit next to him in silence, sometimes handing him a warm drink without a word. And he remembered how she had once stayed awake for 2 whole nights, helping him learn Kirin phrases so he wouldn't embarrass himself during a cultural exchange at work. She had laughed at his mistakes but patiently corrected him, glowing with pride when he finally got it right. These memories clashed with the fear he felt now. How could he be scared of someone who had always protected him? Yet how could he ignore the fact that she had nearly suffocated him in his sleep? The conflict churned inside him. That evening the sun dipped low, painting the small apartment in orange light. David sat at the table staring at a plate of food Lyra had prepared. She had cooked his favorite, simple eggs and toast, though her claws always left the bread cut unevenly. Normally the effort would make him smile, but tonight he only pushed the food around with his fork. Lyra stood by the counter, her frills drooping. She was watching him again, waiting for something, approval, forgiveness, maybe trust. Finally, her voice broke the silence. It was soft, almost trembling. "If you do not trust me, I can go." David froze. His fork slipped from his fingers, clattering against the plate. He looked up at her in shock. Lyra's glowing eyes flickered faintly, dimmer than usual. Her claws tapped nervously against the counter. She looked nothing like the strong protector who had stood against bullies or stayed awake for his sake. She looked fragile. "I do not want to leave," she continued, her voice heavier now. "But if my bond makes you afraid, then I fail. I cannot hurt you. I will not." The words stabbed at David's chest. He had seen Lyra face danger without flinching. He had seen her walk proudly through human streets even when people whispered cruel words. He had never seen her like this, ready to give up, to walk away just because he didn't understand her. His throat tightened. He didn't want her to leave. He didn't want to lose the only person who had stayed by his side when everyone else had turned away. "Lyra." His voice cracked and he had to swallow before trying again. "I was scared. But not of you. Not really. I was scared of not understanding. Of losing this. What we have." Her frills lifted slightly, glowing faintly. Her eyes widened, waiting for him to go on. David took a shaky breath. "You're not just my roommate. You're more than that. You've been my friend, my family, my protector. I don't want you to leave. I need time to understand what this bond means." Lyra's body stilled, her frills flickering with light. She stepped closer, kneeling so her golden eyes met his. For a moment she didn't speak. Then slowly her voice softened. "Then I will give you time. But I will not break bond, I cannot. Even if you fear me, I stay." David felt his chest ache. He didn't know if he was ready to accept everything about her world, her instincts, her dreams. But he knew one thing. He didn't want her to walk away, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. That night, David lay awake again. The apartment was quiet, but his mind was loud. He kept hearing her words repeating in his head. "If you do not trust me, I can go." And then the other one, softer but heavier. "Even if you fear me, I stay." He turned on his side, staring at the ceiling through the faint glow of the city outside. His chest felt heavy. He didn't know what to do with the weight of those words. He wanted to believe her, to trust that everything she did came from care, not danger. But fear still clung to him. He could still remember the pressure of her body holding him down, the way he had gasped for air. That memory was not easy to erase. Across the room, Lyra was curled on the floor mat she preferred instead of a bed. Her species didn't sleep deeply the way humans did, but tonight she looked exhausted. Her frills dimmed to a pale shade, her body unmoving except for the slow rise and fall of her chest. For the first time since they became roommates, David noticed something that made his heart ache. She looked lonely. The next morning, David tried to act normal. He showered, dressed, and made coffee. But the silence between them hung heavy. Lyra moved around the kitchen, careful and quiet, her claws tapping against the counter as she cut fruit unevenly for breakfast. She placed a plate in front of him, but David only stared at it. She watched him waiting, her golden eyes dim. When he didn't eat, she lowered her gaze. Finally, David sighed. "Lyra, you don't have to do all this." "I know you're trying, but I'm still trying to figure everything out." Her frills lifted slightly, then sank again. She whispered, "Trying is not enough. If you cannot trust, bond is weak. And if bond is weak, then I have failed." The sadness in her tone hit him harder than anger ever could. She wasn't upset with him. She was upset with herself. David pushed the plate away and stood.
Lyra, it's not that simple.
Humans, we don't have this bond thing you're talking about. We don't feel dreams the way you do. It's hard for me to just accept it overnight. Her head lifted, her glowing eyes searching his face. But you accept me as friend, yes? David hesitated. Of course I do. Then bond is real, she said, her voice trembling. Because friend protect her family, it is same for Kieran. Bond is not magic. It is choice. I chose you. David's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but words failed him. Instead, he turned away, running his hands through his hair. I need space, Lyra. I need time. Silence fell between them again. He heard her claws tap nervously against the counter, then stop. Her voice came soft, almost broken. If space is what you need, I will give it, but I will not leave the bond. Even if you ask, I cannot. David closed his eyes, guilt heavy in his chest. He didn't answer. The rest of the day dragged by. David went to work, but he couldn't focus. Every sound of the office blurred. Every word from his co-workers felt distant. His thoughts stayed locked on Lyra, the look in her eyes, the sadness in her voice, the way she had said, I cannot leave the bond. By the time he came home, the apartment felt colder than usual. Lyra was sitting by the window, staring out at the city lights. She didn't move when he entered. She didn't even turn her head. David dropped his bag by the door and stood there for a long moment watching her. He realized then that something had shifted between them. She wasn't just his strange alien roommate anymore. She wasn't just someone who cooked uneven toast or scared him in the night. She was someone who cared so deeply it hurt her, someone who had tied her life to his without hesitation, someone who was willing to stay, even if it meant breaking herself in the process. And that scared him more than anything. Not because she was dangerous, but because he was afraid he didn't deserve it. As he sat down quietly on the couch, the distance between them felt larger than ever, even though they were only a few feet apart. He wanted to reach out to close the gap, but his fear and guilt held him still. It was the breaking point not of their bond, but of the silence between them. And David knew that sooner or later he would have to decide, trust her fully, or risk losing the only person who had ever truly stayed. The next morning, David woke early. He hadn't slept much. His mind had been racing all night, torn between fear and guilt. He knew he couldn't keep living in this silence with Lyra. Something had to change. He found her in the kitchen, standing by the window, watching the city outside. Her tall frame was tense, her frills drooping low, the golden glow in her eyes dim. She hadn't touched the plate of fruit she had cut for herself. She looked lost, like a warrior who had put down her weapons and didn't know what to do with her hands anymore. David's chest tightened. He stepped closer, his voice quiet. Lyra. She turned slowly, her gaze landing on him. There was no anger in her eyes, only sadness and exhaustion. I scared you, she said softly, almost whispering, and I cannot take it back. David shook his head quickly. You didn't mean to scare me. I know that now. You thought you were saving me. Her frills twitched, glowing faintly as she lowered her head. Dream told me you stopped. 'Twas clear, David, I saw you without breath. I saw silence. I woke with fear and I acted. He walked closer, leaning against the counter. His voice was gentle but firm. I need to understand, Lyra. What are these dreams, really? Why do they feel so real to you? For a long time, she was quiet. Then slowly she spoke, her words carrying the weight of ancient memory. Kieran are not born alone, she began. We are born in nests. Dozens of us together, breathing as one. When one stops, others feel it. We press close, give weight, force the lungs open. If we do nothing, nestling dies. Her voice grew softer, almost fragile. That is why weight means life to us. Pressure means breath. Bond means family. David's eyes widened. The explanation sank into him like a heavy stone. Suddenly her actions in the night made sense. To her, pressing down on him wasn't an attack. It was instinct, a desperate attempt to save him the same way her kind saved their young. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. So when you dreamed I stopped breathing, she nodded slowly. I felt it as truth. My body moved before my mind. I had to save you, even if you hated me for it. Her voice broke on the last words, and for the first time since he had met her, David saw tears in her golden eyes. Not water like human tears, but a faint glowing mist that shimmered softly in the light. Something in him cracked at that sight. He stepped forward, reaching out slowly. His hand trembled as he touched her clawed hand, holding it gently. "Lyra," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was scared, yes, but not because of you. I was scared because I didn't understand. I thought you were hurting me. But now I see. You weren't trying to harm me. You were trying to protect me the only way you knew." Her frills flickered, glowing brighter with each word. She stared at him, searching his face, her claws trembling slightly in his hand. "I don't deserve this," David whispered. "I don't deserve someone who cares this much." Lyra tilted her head, her glowing eyes soft. "It is not about deserve. It is choice. I chose you, David. My bond is with you. That will not change." His chest ached at her words. He had never heard such loyalty, such certainty from anyone before. Not from his family who lived far away. Not from friends who drifted in and out of his life. Only from her. From this alien who had tied her life to his without hesitation. For the first time, David felt something shift inside him. The fear that had haunted him since that night began to fade, replaced by something warmer, something heavier. Trust. He squeezed her hand gently, his voice steady now. "Then I choose too. I choose to trust you, Lyra. I may not understand everything about your people, about this bond, but I understand you, and that's enough for me." Her frills glowed brightly, lighting up the dim kitchen. For Kieran's, it was the closest thing to a smile. She leaned closer, her voice a soft whisper. "Then you must understand this. My dream was wild, yes, but my bond is real. You are part of me, David. I protect what is part of me." David's throat tightened with emotion. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, he whispered back, "And I protect you too." The words hung in the air, quiet but powerful. For the first time in days, the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was full of something new. Trust, understanding, and the promise of a bond that neither of them could walk away from. The days that followed felt different. The heaviness between David and Lyra slowly faded. Where there had once been silence and distance, there was now conversation, laughter, and a quiet understanding that words alone could not capture. David found himself watching her more closely, not with fear but with fascination. He noticed the way her frills glowed when she saw the sunrise, the way her claws trembled slightly when she held fragile human objects, the way she tilted her head when trying to understand human humor. She wasn't just an alien anymore, she was his friend, his roommate, his protector. Lyra too had changed. She no longer held herself back. She spoke more about her people, her home, her memories of the nest. She explained how every Kieran grew up knowing the rhythm of many hearts beating together, the comfort of many breaths shared in the dark. To be alone had always been her greatest fear. And yet here she was in a world not her own, tied by choice to one human heartbeat. One evening they sat together on the balcony. The city lights glowed below them and the night air was cool and gentle. David leaned back in his chair, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Lyra sat beside him, her tall form calm and still, her glowing eyes watching the stars. "Do you miss them?" David asked softly. Lyra turned her gaze toward him. "My nest?" He nodded, her frills lowered slightly. "Every day, but I do not regret leaving, because if I had not, I would not have found you." Her words struck something deep inside him. He tightened the blanket around himself, trying to hide the emotion in his face. "You make it sound like I'm special." "You are," Lyra said simply. No hesitation, no doubt. David let out a shaky laugh, rubbing his eyes. "No one has ever said that to me and meant it." She leaned closer, her voice softer than the night wind. "Then they did not see you as I do. You are fragile but strong, afraid but brave, alone but willing to trust again. That is rare. That is precious." For a long time, David couldn't speak. The words sat heavy in his chest, too much and yet exactly what he needed. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you, Lyra." Silence settled between them, but it was a peaceful silence, not the kind that weighed them down before. This silence was warm, filled with trust, filled with bond. Later that night, as David lay in bed, he found his thoughts drifting. He remembered the fear of waking to her weight on him, the panic in his chest, the confusion in her eyes. And then he remembered her tears, her trembling words, the way she had chosen him without hesitation. He turned his head. Lyra sat on the floor by the window, her usual resting place. She wasn't asleep. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, watching the stars. For the first time, David didn't feel fear at her presence. Instead, he felt safe. He knew deep inside that no harm would come to him as long as she was there.